You're enjoying Racing World. It's brought to you by Perspective Group. It's your global motorsport podcast show brought to you in conjunction with Race Control Magazine.
Almost October, nearly Christmas time, but boy oh boy, what a bumper week this one was. It's all go here on Racing World. Welcome back to another edition of Racing World. Well, this week, of course, the headline has to be Kiwi Liam Lawson, finally in Formula One. But it's only until the end of 2024 season. It's not a 25 deal, but you'd have to assume that that's just another piece of what we'd call Red Bull marketing. And speaking of that, I'd have to say this was an appallingly handled event by Red Bull. On again, off again, rumours and all sorts of things. Even this post that I found the other day where it said that Daniel Ricciardo wasn't going to go. Now, this was posted on Wednesday, New Zealand time, so well after the Singaporean Grand Prix. So, you just got to wonder what sort of media exercise they were running here and the mind games that were going on as well. Now, of course, there's talk of whether Sergio Perez will keep his seat. So this circle just keeps going on and on and on. One thing I think that we can be rest assured of is the fact that Danny Rick has probably gone from Formula One, and it wasn't a great way to see him go. He deserved a better sign-off than that. But, this is the harsh, cruel world of Formula One, and let's see what Liam can deliver in these next races. He's up against a few things, and of course, when he gets to Austin, it was announced this morning that he'll take a 10-place grid drop in the sprint race there because they're going to do an engine change there, and Helmut Marko coming out this morning saying that will happen. So at the very best, he's going to get a 10-place grid drop. So that's maybe not the best of ways to start. But anyway, it's a Kiwi in Formula One. We should be proud of that. I'm not going to let this go just yet. There's two things that I want to say here. One, because I'm having a bit of a rant, we should be very thankful for the efforts of one Grant McDonald, who started the whole Speed Sport Scholarship years ago. It's brought along great people like Shane van Gisbergen and now Liam Lawson. The Sabre Motorsport team out of the Manawatu area running the Formula First program with Grant in those Speed Sport Scholarship days, which have continued on. Grant just put countless amounts of effort into that. I've known him for a long time. He used to run the Speed Sport magazine here in New Zealand. Great guy, and he was one of those very founding people that pushed the Liam Lawson case more than probably anyone else. And that's not forgetting his family, of course, but Grant's probably the unsung hero in all of this as well. So congratulations, Grant, on achieving this, and let's see how far it goes. The other thing I want to say, because I've heard a lot of New Zealanders talking about this in recent days, and it actually angers me a little bit, is it's fantastic that we have Liam Lawson in Formula One. I'm not denying that at all, but let's not put down our other races. All of a sudden I'm hearing that he's the greatest driver of all time. Well, where does that put Scott Dixon then? Where does that put Brendan Hartley? Where does that put Earl Bamber? Where does that put SVG? The list goes on and on and on. We have Kiwis in so many categories right now, and we need to remember how good they all are. And as I said, it's not taking anything away from Liam, but it's stating a clear fact. We have a lot of Kiwis in a lot of places, and they are all worthy of being there, and they are all good in their own right. So everyone is good. Everyone gets the big green tick, that's for sure. Well, as I said, I think Liam's done an amazing job to get where he is right now in the space of about 8 years. So just phenomenal performance, not taking anything away from him, but just want to acknowledge all those other New Zealanders that are competing on a world stage day in, day out. And just shows you the depth of talent we've got here. And let's hope that with the efforts of the Tony Quinn Foundation, the Elite Motorsport Academy, the recently announced Road and Cars Formula Ford type scholarship, that we can keep the New Zealand talent going, because this is an expensive sport, and these guys have got there. And as I said, the true unsung hero in my eyes is Grant McDonald. So take a bow, Grant. Big fan of what you've done, and you stood by this through thick and thin, and it must be a great feeling inside for you to know that you've got Liam to this place. Well, that's Formula One, but boy, oh boy, Indycar, it's only had 2 weeks since the season ended, and man, has there been plenty going on. I think there's been more going on in the last 2 weeks than there was for most of the season in terms of who's doing what's happening where, who's doing things. It's just phenomenal. So it started really a couple of days after the race at Nashville at the Super Speedway there, and by Tuesday we were hearing these stories coming out of the US of the fact that the FBI had raided cleared the Rahal Letterman workshop area and all the office space. Staff were told to clear the area and go home. Computers were seized, and there was a big inquiry. This was launched by Andretti Global because of a person that had left Andretti Global some time ago. Believe it was an engineer, and there was accusations of the fact that transfer of technology had moved to Rahal's, and there's a big FBI inquiry into it. Haven't heard much about it in the last few days, so I don't think it's gone quiet. I think they're just investigating the thing. Reminds me a lot of some things that we had years and years ago with McLaren in Formula One. But the FBI involved with Rahal Letterman, not a good look to start the off-season. Next up, just days after the Nashville Grand Prix or the Nashville Superspeedway event, Marcus Armstrong, the third Kiwi in Indycar this season, announced the fact that he was departing Chip Ganassi Racing as they downscaled to 3 cars, and a little bit more on that in a second. But Armstrong announcing that he'll be joining the Meyer Shank Racing team for 2025, hopefully and beyond. He'll be alongside Felix Rosenqvist, who's also re-signed with Shanks. So there's a great combo there. And of course, he goes from having Dario Franchitti as his driver coach to one Elio Castro Neves. So not a bad deal there, Marcus, because going back to what I was saying just a few minutes ago, Armstrong raced in the Toyota Racing Series, as it was called then, back in New Zealand, against one Liam Lawson. So if you look at both of them in the space of what they've done in the last few years, they both deserve just a great shout out for everything they've done. So to see Armstrong with a secure drive in IndyCar for 2025 is a really big deal. Way bigger than I think it's getting credit for in New Zealand. It's kind of flying under the radar. But Marcus and all his team around him, it's just an awesome job. Well done. You deserve to be there. And I think you're in for good times at Shanks. I think that they're capable of doing things. They certainly can deliver an Indy 500 winning car, and they have a technical alliance with Ganassi. So that's good. That's going to keep some of that recipe the same. So Marcus Armstrong, looking forward to seeing you in those colours in 2025. But the news just kept on coming. It was like it was just flowing with news this week from IndyCar and the week before. So the next up thing was the fact that Penske Entertainment / IndyCar announced the fact that the charter system was coming into play. There was 2 teams, I don't know who they were, that kind of dragged the chain a little bit, but ultimately they signed on the dotted line as well. So what this has done is meant that no team under the charter arrangement can run more than 3 cars, hence the downscaling from Ganassi. However, there is a loophole whereby you can run an additional car. It just doesn't form part of the charter. Now, the deal with the charter gives you a guaranteed start at any event other than the Indy 500, where you still have to qualify, which of all of these things with the charter arrangement, that's the one thing I agree on, is the fact that the Indy 500 is the Indy 500, and to qualify at the 500, you need to perform. You've only got to look at Rahal's for the last couple of years. They've struggled big time. If they were getting an automatic entry under the charter, that'd be a car that would be there that really didn't deserve to be there. I'm not picking on them, I'm just stating a fact. And the fact then is it eliminates someone like maybe Dreyer Reinbold going, you know what, we're not going to do a 500 deal because we can't get in. So at least the 500 is still fair game. You got to qualify to be in the 33. If there's a bump, there's a bump. That's the way it goes. But the charter will enable the 25 cars that are in the charter system to always get a guaranteed start. Now, Prema, who are joining the series next year, are not part of that charter system. So if there was ever tracks whereby the tracks couldn't cope with the number of cars, they will have to effectively pre-qualify. Now, there's been talk also recently of maybe Ganassi coming back to a 4th car. If they did, it falls outside of the charter system. And the top 22 within that charter system become eligible for the Leaders Circle money, just as they do now. So there's lots of complications in it, but basically the charter's there. It's like a franchise agreement. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but it's a very, very big change in the way IndyCar will look in the coming years. Then still just days after the race at Nashville, it's like this stuff was obviously all brewing during the Nashville event, but finally came out in the week after the event, was the fact that Rinus VeeKay was leaving Ed Carpenter Racing. Now, no one expected this, and I think that includes Rinus VeeKay himself. The story goes that they were trying to negotiate something and it just didn't come together for whatever reason. These things happen. We've talked about it heaps of times before. But VeeKay departs Ed Carpenter Racing. Where does VeeKay go at this time of the season? That is the awkward bit, because there is not that many seats to be around. So it was a surprise. There was no hint of it during the Nashville event, but VeeKay gone from ECR also that came out this week was the fact that ECR now has a partial team owner as well that's bought in, or an investor that's bought into the team, and that's changing the look of the team a little bit as well. And I think we'll see some more of that transpire in the next few weeks. But it also announced its driver lineup for 2025. Christian Rasmussen is in full-time after doing what was going to be a part-time season and became a full-time season. He's now full-time in 2025, ex-Indy Next, as it was, Indy Lights, call it whatever you like, but he's there full-time. And alongside him in 2025, Alexander Rossi, departing from McLaren, departing from Andretti Autosport as it was, and now will be at ECR, probably bringing quite a lot of Andretti-type thinking to the team. So that's a great addition to the team. And of course, Ed Carpenter cars are always very strong at the Indy 500. Rossi very brave on the high line around the Indianapolis track. So that's a good combination ahead. And then Ed will be back in the car for the 500 only entry. Maybe we'll see him do some other ovals, but he'll certainly be there. So 3 cars for the Indy 500 and 2 full-time under the charter arrangement as well for the rest of the season. Oh, but wait, there's more. Juncos Racing still yet to announce any drivers for 2025. Now, the hot story that I got as recently as this morning was the fact that neither Romain Grosjean or Connor Daly, who drove those last few races, are secure at Juncos Hollinger Racing for 2025. So there's potentially 2 seats up for grabs there. Be very interesting to see how they play themselves out. Daly didn't do himself any harm at those last few races, and we spoke to him in Nashville. He was very upbeat. Grosjean, yeah, he delivered quite a bit, but right now what Juncos Hollinger Racing needs is something solid to cement what they've done this year and move forward. So a wholesale change, in my eyes, may not be the best of moves, so it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. So there's 2 seats that are still currently available. Then from the rumour mill, which started a couple of days ago, was the fact that there is still no 2025 IndyCar calendar out, let alone an Indy Next calendar. So we're wondering what the stumbling block is there. Will there be a surprise? I've heard rumours of even Watkins Glen. There was even talk of a race back in Texas around the streets of downtown Dallas. Now, that disappeared and was crushed pretty quickly. It had some backing from the Dallas Cowboys owner because the rumour is that the track is going to go around the football stadium. Now, it's gone a little bit further since then, and they're saying that 2026 that race may happen. However, IndyCar refuses to comment on the matter. There's been a little bit of social action about it, but IndyCar themselves are saying there is nothing necessarily in place yet. Don't forget, we lost the race at the Texas Motor Speedway, the High Banked Oval, which it's a shame to see that go because that delivered great races, and it should still be there. It's another oval. It's an iconic oval, very high bank one. And we're going to replace that with a street course in maybe downtown Dallas. Don't forget, however, that NTT, the founding sponsor or the principal sponsor for the IndyCar series, is also based in Dallas. So there's a little bit of probably commercialism going on in play. So we'll wait to see. Don't think it'll be in the 25 calendar, but it looks like it could end up in 26. And there's talk of the fact that that will be announced in the next 2 weeks. Well, yes, there's more. I mentioned just a while ago that Prema don't fall under the charter system, partially because they're a new team and they've got to kind of go their way, if you like, to get into the game. But they did announce the fact that they've signed one driver, and it was one Callum Ilott. So Ilott returns to the IndyCar series. He had a great connection with Prema in Europe, in an open wheel category as well. So it'd be interesting to see how they cement things together. I've heard from a number of people the fact that Prema are busy out there, for want of a better word, poaching staff from wherever they can to build up their arsenal of talent. They've started work on their workshop. I believe it's a little bit behind, but these things, it's typical motorsport. Things are always behind, but that's coming together. So that's on the move. Be interesting to see who gets the second seat at Prema. I think that they need to have a decent driver as well to support Ilott, certainly in these initial years. Then again, they may go young talent, so it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. Speaking of young talent, Logan Sargent, a former Williams F1 driver, is testing an MSR car at, which this bit's quite strange, the Thermal Club racetrack in the coming weeks. Don't know why it's happening at Thermal. Yes, there's potentially a championship event there next year. However, Thermal is not one of those tracks that you would necessarily say is an out-and-out test track. Be interesting to see him maybe turn wheels at Barber Motorsport Park, for example, which I believe Jamie Chadwick for Andretti's is having a drive around there in the coming weeks before the weather all changes as the seasons change in the US. But the test is going to happen at Thermal. Now, that doesn't guarantee Logan Sargent a seat with MSR at all, because the fact that both Rosenquist and now Armstrong have signed for 2025. So it's just interesting that that's going out. And I'm sure the information flow will flow out of that. So if there are people looking for a driver, Logan Sargent will certainly be on the radar and be interesting to see how he goes. But I do find it quirky that it's happening at Thermal, other than the fact that it's a private club. So there is the level of privacy around that whole thing. So maybe that's part of the deal. Then we get on to the next bit of the interesting puzzle. Who doesn't have a drive or who's looking for a drive in 2025? What we do know currently, let's deal with the things that we do know. Penske, the driver lineup is secure there. Newgarden, McLaughlin, Power, they're all back for more, so that's fine. Chip Ganassi Racing, at least Dixon and Palau. Griffin Simpson, don't really know. Brings a lot of money to the table, but is that enough to warrant the seat? Only time will tell on that one. We know that Chip's a hard customer. Would they ever expand to a fourth car and a non-chartered car? Again, only time would tell. Andretti Global, they're pretty much going to be back where they are. Same lineup of drivers. They're testing Jamie Chadwick, as I just mentioned, but I think that that's an evaluation process. And again, they'd have to run that car outside of the charter system. Then you move on to some of the teams that are on the move, or certainly were on the move towards the tail end of the season. AJ Foyt Racing, we know that they'll have Santino Ferrucci and David Malukas next year. Prema, as I said, will have Callum Ilott and a yet-to-be-named second driver. Graham Wareham will certainly return to the team that's named after his surname, run by his father, and, of course, David Letterman. Who else will drive there? Don't know yet, so there's some seats there. Dale Coyne, obviously he'll shop around, but under the charter system, he can't do what he did this year. He can't run multiple drivers. There's effectively, if you want to call it, the Dale Coyne clause within the charter to limit the number of drivers a team can run on any given year. So he can't repeat what he did this year. So he'll go shopping for drivers. He's a talent spotter as well, so we'll see how that one plays out. Ed Carpenter, we've obviously talked about, and the surprise move in some ways of the departure of Renus VK. Then, of course, there's the boys in Papaya, Pato Award back, Nolan Siegel, and then Christian Lundgaard moving from Rahals across to the Papaya team. So that's the McLaren lineup for 2025 sorted. So there's not a lot of space to play with. And then drivers on the outside right now, well, then certainly VK, who was the surprise appearance on the list. Then you've got Stingray Rob, Jack Harvey, maybe Roman Grosjean, Connor Daly, Catherine Legg. Linus Lundqvist is a refugee from Chip Ganassi Racing. Griffin Simpson, maybe the same. There's a host of drivers, and that's before we talk to the ones, or about the ones that maybe should be there, with Kiwis like Hunter McElroy, who had that one race at Toronto, who deserves to be there. And we'll talk about him in a second as well, because he had a great win over the weekend. So there's lots of combinations of things still to play out. So it's going to be a very busy off-season. Teams will test again before the season, or before the summer. Well, it's now 4 months come to an end and winter sets in. So there's a lot going on. But boy, oh boy, there's plenty of stuff going on in the world of IndyCar. And then there was one final piece of information that broke just this morning, just as I was about to start doing this podcast show. And that is Micheal Andretti steps aside at Andretti Global. And the team will be run by someone from the Group 1001 organisation who's been around the team for a long time. But Michael will step aside and become an ambassador to the team that found as his name and his family's surname. But he will not be the top dog anymore at Andretti Global. And this is a major twist. There's more to come on this for sure, and a lot more to come. And I'll have that for you in our next show. But that's a breaking news, the fact that Micheal Andretti steps aside at Andretti Global. Now, this affects effectively not only the IndyCar team, but whatever Andretti's was going to do in Formula One, what they do in Formula E, what they do in their off-road series, maybe even what they do in Australian supercars with the alliance that they have down there. So it's a big thing. And again, it came out of the woodwork, complete shock, like most of these things that we've just mentioned. So much going on in the world of IndyCar. It almost wears you out with all that news that's happening in IndyCar. And as I said, it seems busier than what the real season was. There's so much more that's going to happen there. So many variables in play right now. The charter system, that's a significant one. The fact that there's no 2025 calendar yet, I think that's significant. They've lost the chance to make a big hurrah about the calendar. Normally it's announced at, one of the last events as a bit of a showcase thing. That hasn't happened. Wondering what the stumbling block is there. Now, speaking of that and speaking of Kiwis, Hunter McElrea last week in the LMP2 class in the 6-hour Battle of the Bricks at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course, taking a win. Now, we saw him only just a week earlier at the Nashville Super Speedway, and he was brimming at the face getting ready for that race, and they brought the car home in what was just awful conditions, downpours. They had every season you could possibly think of, which is classic Indianapolis weather at this time of the year. But Hunter McElrea claiming his first win in the LMP2 class at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course, and that is a phenomenal performance. Well done, Hunter. Andy, I can almost see your smile from here, so that's a pretty big smile, I'm sure. And this is another Kiwi, because I keep mentioning this because I'm on a bit of a bandwagon about it, that is doing really, really well and deserves support from New Zealand. So we have these drivers. Let's get behind them. Let's really support these guys. But Hunter, great job. I know how chuffed you'd be by that, and I may say you fit in that car because, man, you're getting tall as well. Well, I think that pretty much sums up just a quick rapid fire 2 weeks of review of everything that's been happening. Formula One, Indycar, Bathurst, of course, coming up soon for V8 Supercar. There's a lot going on. And then, of course, the New Zealand domestic motorsport season will start. Speedway season start here in New Zealand. Western Springs making big announcements of drivers that are potentially coming down here. T-Mez will be back and in a sprint car. There's a great lineup of stuff that's going to happen at the Springs. The 50-lap sprint car race will be back in the early part of next year. The New Zealand Midget Champs at Western Springs Speedway, the traditional Boxing Day event, and of course, surprise, surprise, not really a surprise, SVG will be in a sprint car there as well. So it'd be great to see him back at home in front of the home crowd. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to cover in the next 2 months. And just before I go, I can announce that Kiwis Born to Fly 2, the doco, will be starting shooting in just a week's time from now, and you'll see that on Sky Sport 5 exclusively in 2025 in the first quarter, and then we're hopeful that we'll get it on board the national carrier again and distribute it a little bit wider than what the first one did because we don't have quite the same restrictions. But yes, Kiwis Born to Fly 2 is coming out. It's a little bit of a twist, but let's just say it involves the business of motorsport and how Kiwis are just on a global stage. So look out for that. Kiwis Born to Fly, coming in 2025. Until next week, however, let's just try and catch our breath, and we'll see you again on Racing World.
You're enjoying Racing World. It's brought to you by Perspective Group. It's your global motorsport podcast show brought to you in conjunction with Race Control Magazine.